All right, hello everyone. So we'll get started. Thank you very much for registering to this webinar. It is Intro to WAG, so Women's Artistic Gymnastics Judging. And this is a presentation that was made by myself as well as Adriana, who is on the call. So as per the other webinars, if you've taken part in any of them, if you can make sure that you are muted throughout the presentation. And it's also recommended to have the video feed off just so we can preserve the bandwidth and hopefully mitigate any connection issues that we might have. If you have any questions, which are very welcome, please do type them into the chat function. You can either send them to everybody as a group, or you can send them privately to Adriana, who will be monitoring the chat, and then she will interrupt me to ask the questions on your behalf. This session is currently being recorded, and it should be posted on the Gymnastics BC YouTube page very shortly. However, I do believe there's a little bit of backlog there, so it might take a few more days before it's actually online. However, it will be there for future reference. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Momona Kunagara. I've been a judge in British Columbia for over 12 years. I'm a national high performance. I also give some of the courses in the province, the judging courses. And I am staff at GBC. And then also with us, we have Adriana Schmel, if she would like to introduce herself, please. Adriana?
There we go.
I'm not hearing you. So I'll say a few things on her behalf. I hope that's okay. Adriana is the Women's Judging Committee, the WJC chairperson, going into her second season as chairperson. Oh, hi. Still can't hear you, unfortunately. Can anyone type in the chat if you can hear Adriana? Maybe that's just a me problem, but I can't hear you at all. Ah, there we go. Hi.
Sorry. Oh my gosh, and here I am talking. Okay, sorry, I'll start again. My name is Adriana, and I have been the judging chair for the past year and this upcoming year again. And I work with the Women's Judging Committee, which has 10 members, all judges from all levels. And I also work with the Women's Technical Committee. And under us are also 8 zone chairs, each representing a region in British Columbia. I'm the zone chair for Zone 5, which is Vancouver. And that's it. I'm a JO10 national judge. Back to you.
Awesome, thank you very much. So the presentation today will be focusing on 3 portions. The first one will be kind of the general lines of how to judge. The second portion will have to do with symbols. And the third portion has a bit more to do with the procedural stuff, as well as the policies and procedures in place for judges. And before we get started, does anyone have any questions? I don't see anything coming through the chat at the moment, but if anything does come through, Adriana, please do interrupt me. Okay, so intro to judging. I'd love to be in person and be able to kind of show you with my body. Usually when I'm presenting things, I like to do a lot of kind of demonstration. I find that it breaks things up a little bit and sometimes makes things a bit easier to understand. So I will try to be as engaging as possible without the use of a full room and my whole body. Okay. So what is judging? Judging is the act of evaluating routines impartially in order to rank the performances. So for me, I always like to think of it as how far away from perfection the athlete's routine was, and that should be what my score reflects. So now that will be based on how close it was in terms of deduction and execution. It will also be based on how difficult the routine was, because each skill has a value. It will be based on how many requirements for the level were met, and also on the start value that the routine would receive. So all those things combined together will help me get to a score. So some things to keep in mind if you are interested in judging. We're not saying here that all of these things you must have in order to become a judge. It's just the kind of the values and the traits that are most important to becoming an effective judge. And first is objectivity. So we want judges that are impartial. It's important that we are coming up with scores that are not based on whether the gymnast that we're judging is someone that we know, or maybe it's a club that we know or don't know, or the ethnicity of the gymnast, or whatever else it might be. We have to be as unbiased and impartial as possible. Preparedness, initiative, and self-awareness, also very important. Gymnastics judging is basically like a job, and we have to make sure that we look at it professionally. Attention to detail, I think that kind of goes without saying. When we're looking at all these various skills, we have to look at every little detail of the skill to be able to know how close to perfection it was performed. Rule following. Part of the job, of course, is to know the rules, or at least to be able to find where the rules are written and then just apply them. It should not be something that is subjective. It should be completely objective and just rule following. At the same time, unfortunately, sometimes verbiage or the way the rules are written isn't always 100% clear. And so in those cases, we do have to use our critical thinking as well as our understanding of gymnastics movement. Now, judges or potential judges that were gymnasts themselves or maybe coaches will have a much easier time becoming judges. And that's definitely not to say that, for example, parents that have never done the sport can't be judges. We definitely don't want to discourage that. It just will take a lot more work and preparation and watching a lot of gymnastics in order to really become an efficient judge. Leadership is also important. It's important to know as much as possible and be confident in the knowledge and being able to share that knowledge with others, including coaches and potentially other judges as well. At the same time, we have to have the ability to work with each other, and again, including coaches. Judges, just like the coaches, we are here to serve the athletes. And that should always be the first thing that we have in mind. So the ability to work with others, that might mean that we have to compromise on our scores in order to be in range. And then, of course, a passion for gymnastics. As judges, unfortunately, we often are not necessarily appreciated, and it's possibly easy for some people to blame the judges for a bad score rather than the athlete's performance. We also do get paid, but not necessarily in the amount that really goes hand in hand with the amount of hours that we put into this. So really, we have to have a love for the sport, a passion for gymnastics, for wanting to improve the sport in order to really be involved, I think. Okay, so what to expect at a competition as a judge. Now, I do have to mention that because of COVID-19, we don't yet know all of the changes and precautions and how competition will be held next season, just because of the maximum number of people and the social distancing and all that. So do keep in mind that some of this might be a bit different. In any case, prior to a competition, you would have had communication with the zone judging chair in which the competition is being held, because they are the ones that are making the panels. The panels are your assignments. So basically what event you'll be judging, what level that will be, what time it starts, all of that information is on the panels. So you'd receive those beforehand. If it is a paid meet, and we'll talk about later on in the presentation what is a paid meet and what isn't, you would have your expenses reimbursed as well as you would be receiving an honorarium. Usually you would receive a check at a competition, but some of them, they will mail them after the fact. When you first arrive, the first thing that you would probably be doing is attend the judges meeting. So that's where the competition head judge would review some rules, maybe mention a few things that are competition specific, make sure everyone's clear on their assignment. And then the competition would start. So the panels of judges will be at 2 minimum. As a brand new judge, you would always be placed on a panel with someone that is more experienced and who would be able to mentor you. So you don't have to have the fear of arriving there all alone and having to make all these decisions by yourself when it's the very beginning. Then the athletes would march into the competition, and the apparatus head judge, so that won't be you if you're a brand new judge, would check the athletes in. Now again, with the COVID-19 precautions, I'm not sure what this part would look like, the march-in and the check-in. Chances are it's going to be different this upcoming season. Now, there might be some coach inquiries during the competition. Those coach inquiries would always be directed to the apparatus head judge. So as a brand new judge, you will not be expected to answer any coach inquiries. You should stay seated at the apparatus that you were judging at until the last athlete has finished competing on any event. And then it's a good idea at the end of each session to fill out your judging records, And we'll go into more detail about those a little bit later on in the presentation as well. And then usually, especially if you're there for more than one session, you should receive some sort of meal, snacks, or beverages. Now, again, with COVID-19, I'm not sure what that's going to look like next season. So I guess that'll be something for everyone to learn. So when you are judging, it is expected that you bring everything that you need to judge with you. We can't expect the competitions to have all that material for us. So that means that if you're judging, for example, the optional levels, then you should have either this binder, which has all the rules, or maybe the app on a tablet, or the iBook, on that tablet. You should have your symbol sheet, any kind of aids or cheat sheets that you should have all of that with you. Your judging records, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. Any writing instruments, so whether you judge with pen or pencil, all of that stuff is your responsibility to bring. And then your paper or judging sheets. Panels, of course, that could be on a phone. And then stopwatch and measuring tape. Those are optional, but definitely recommended. Sometimes they are not provided at the competition, so it's good to have that with you. And then if you had any expenses, maybe some mileage or ferry receipts, things like that that were approved in advance, you should have that with you as well. And we do have a uniform to judge. It's important that we look somewhat uniform and definitely professional, and that we're easily identified. We are, after all, seen as the authority at a meet. So the judging uniform is a navy blue pant or skirt, all solid white top or blouse. It's supposed to cover the shoulders. The navy blue suit jacket or cardigan is optional. And then appropriate footwear. Basically, we want to consider the professional look, and also no heels that could puncture mats, especially when we're judging inside the gyms. We don't want to break their equipment. And then no yoga pants, no running shoes, no hats. Okay. So to me, this part is the fun stuff, how to judge. So as a gymnast is performing, we have to watch her, but we also have to write down everything she does. That means we're going to write down the entire routine with symbols and deductions without looking down, as if we look down, we can be missing what the athlete is performing. Once the athlete is done, we should review the routine that we've written down. And then if it went a little bit too fast and you missed any symbols or deductions, then you would fill that in. You would then check if the routine had all of the necessary requirement for the level or the major elements. And then you add up all your deductions and your overall deductions and get to a final score out of 10. So I'll break down each of these things a little bit further. I'm going a little bit fast here. Okay. So here's an example. The top portion here, so that would be what should be on a paper basically once the athlete is finished. This is the JO4 floor routine. Oops, pardon me. This is the JO4 floor routine. And then the bottom is exactly the same routine, but that's after I've finished judging. So with my throughout as well as the final score. So if I explain it in a little bit more detail, each of these, what we kind of affectionately call squigglies, are symbols. They each represent a skill or a major element. And then above or beside them, you can see little check marks with letters or numbers with letters. These are the way that I write my deductions. Now, each judge has different ways to write down their deductions. For me, the check marks are the 0.05 deduction. It just takes too long to write 0.05, so I write the check mark instead. And then the letter helps me identify what the error was. So this routine that I wrote, I believe a couple years ago, I could still read it back to you now with the deductions. And that's something that's super important to be, or to become able to do. So this athlete started with a straddle jump that took half a 10 for the feet flex. And she connected this to a jump, a straight jump half turn, and took half a 10 for the rhythm of connection between the two elements. Then she did a front handspring with 2 feet, half a 10 for the knees bent. She did a back extension to handstand, half a 10 for lack of amplitude in the handstand. Then she did a split on the floor, no deduction. A zone with no deduction, connected to a split leap, 1/10 deduction for the knees bent. Full turn on 1 foot, half a 10 for the lack of releve. So that's being on the high tippy-toe for the sport foot. A back walkover, 2/10 deduction for knees bent. And then round off, back handspring, back handspring. The round off had the half a 10 for feet flex. Each of the back handspring had a half a 10 for legs apart. And then it looks like there was a half a 10 for a little step or shuffle at the end here. So all of this should be written basically as the gymnast is going. Then when I was reviewing the routine, I have taken here some deduction for the artistry and then some throughout deductions. I'll explain those a little bit later. She's a compulsory athlete, so her start value was 10. All deductions added together were 1.05, so the final score that I gave this particular athlete was at 8.95. So there are different types of deductions, as I kind of just mentioned a little bit. We do have execution deductions. So each error has an associated deductions, and there are flat deductions and up to deduction. A flat deduction would be something like a fall. The deduction for that is a flat 0.5, and it's always going to be a 0.5, well, within this particular code anyways. Up to deductions are deductions that you can take increments of that deduction. So for example, lack of height in a salto is an up to 0.3. So if the athlete is just missing a tiny little bit of height, I would say, oh, I'm going to take 0.05 deduction. If she's missing all of the height possible, then I could take the full 0.3. So it's an up to, so I can take increments of 0.05 as I see fit. And these execution errors, they are taken as they happen within the exercise. We also have throughout deductions, and these are overall deductions that are event specific. So for example, on floor, there are a few throughout deductions that are music related. Of course, we only have music on floor, so that one is event specific. And this is kind of a deduction that is taken after the routine has ended. It helps you with the overall impression of the routine rather than one specific error on a specific skill. Then we have artistry. These are deductions that we only take on the beam and on the floor, and it's also an overall deduction that we take after the routine has ended as an overall impression of the artistry. And finally, we have composition. This is something that we only take at higher levels, so 8, 9, and 10. And these are mandatory deductions based on the routine construction. So an example of this, for example, is an example of this is on the beam. Athletes are required to have choreography that travels forwards, backwards, and sideways. So it's not necessarily skill related. These composition deductions, it could be with really just the routine construction, how it was made. Okay. Any questions about this? I've not seen the chat here. It looks like no. Okay. And the start value. So for compulsory, it is always 10.0. The only exception if the athlete just comes, presents, or touches the apparatus and leaves, in which case she'll have 0 or did not start. But otherwise, it's always 10. Any requirements or omitted substituted elements, they are taken as deduction from the 10 start value. For optional, there are several things that we have to look at in order to give the start value. So the start value could be really any number from almost 0, I guess, or 1 to 10. It would include value parts, so that's the value of skill. Each level has a different number of value parts that they need. So each skill, for example, a cartwheel, that's worth an A on the floor. Special requirements. So these are level-specific requirements, particular connections or particular skills that the athletes have to fulfill. And if they don't, there's going to be deduction that will make the start value lower. There are also restricted elements. So at certain levels, athletes cannot perform elements that are deemed too difficult for their level. So if they do that, they would also have deductions that come from the start value. And finally, at level 9 and 10, we add in bonus. So all of these elements come into play when we are looking at the start value of optional routine. But if you are looking taking this webinar, just interested in judging or curious how it works, or maybe you're looking at becoming a new judge next season, you don't have to worry about all of the optional stuff as you would have to start from compulsory. Okay. So that's the end of the first section. So the very broad strokes of how to judge. Now we're going into symbols. So symbols are basically judge's language, and it is deemed the fastest, easiest, and most consistent way to write down everything that the athlete performed without taking your eyes off of the gymnast. They're super, super important because it ensures the routine accuracy. It facilitates the judging process as well as communication between judges. Sometimes if we are dealing, including with myself, with maybe not being super proficient with the English language, especially in relation to gymnastics, but symbols, judges are able to read those regardless of the language. And it also helps, the symbols very much help you in answering inquiries. A coach could come to me, well, really a week after I judge the athlete, I can look back into my book and be able to read the routine just like I did for the example a few slides ago. And it's really important to be able to do that. The etymology of symbols, that's a word I like a lot because etymology basically means the science of words, so where words come from. And symbols are just like words. They have roots, they have prefixes, suffixes, and they are, and yes, I wrote mostly they're logical. Most of the time by looking at them and taking them apart into little bits, you can figure out what the skill is because of those roots, prefixes, and suffixes. So we'll look at some of those to give you an idea. So body shapes. So we have pike, tuck, layout, straddle, split, and wolf. And you can notice that the symbol associated with them really resembles the body shape or the shape that the athlete should have when they're in those shapes. So for pike, it kind of looks like a V. For tuck, if you extend that line here, it looks like the body, and this should be kind of the knees of the gymnast as well as in her feet down here. It looks like a reversed N. Layout, well, she's in a straight line, hopefully. Straddle, it looks like a straddle. Split also looks like a split. This little kind of swoopy curly thing here is kind of representing the athlete's upper body. And then the wolf, not only does it look like looks like a W for wolf, but a wolf jump is an extended tuck. It's a tuck jump with one leg extended. So you can see the tuck portion with one leg extended. Kind of cool, I like this one. For twisting and turning, a half a turn is like your U. So it's kind of like half of a full turn here. And then the turn and a half, to add the half turns, we're adding lines. So double turn, we're adding 2 lines. And then we kind of have to reverse that logic when we go to twists, because for twist, the full twist is this kind of funny sideways curly thing. Well, if I cut it in half, it's a half twist. So 1 1/2 is 2 curlies with the second one cut in half. And of course, the double twist is 2 like this. So the turning symbols we'll use for things like turn on 1 foot, wolf turns, as well as turning leaps and jumps. Whereas the twisting here, we're talking about the saltoing elements that have twist in them. Some more of what I like to call the prefixes and suffixes. When something has flight, when it's in the air, it's usually represented with a little line underneath the symbol. If something is done with 2 feet, it's represented with these 2 feet, 2 little lines. If something is done with support, either with support of the bar or support on the floor, we have 2 lines kind of to show the ground. If something is aerial or done free of hands, we have this kind of cursive F attached to the symbol. And switch is represented with a Z. And it's kind of mimicking the trajectory that your switching does. Or if you think of a switch split leap, it's kind of mimicking the trajectory of the leg that's switching. That makes sense. Okay, some basic or root skills. Handstand. Well, it's a straight body with my head at the bottom. Handstand, it's like an exclamation point. A cartwheel is an X. So when you're doing a cartwheel, your body kind of looks like an X. And then the round off is similar to the cartwheel sign, but your legs come together. So there's only 1 leg in the air here instead of the 2 legs apart. The salto forward is this kind of squiggly. It does imitate the trajectory that the body has in the air. And the same for the salto backwards. It's just, again, backwards, as that is the trajectory that the body has in the air. Front walkover. We are looking at the body making this kind of a bridge with the head forward as we're going in this direction. And then the back walkover is also the bridge, but we're putting the head in the middle, as it kind of looks like the head is almost stationary with the legs going all the way over to the other side. Tick-tock is a mix of the previous 2, as it's kind of a skill that goes forward and then that goes backwards. The front handspring is like the front walkover, but we've added the little line for flight. So it shows that it's a front walkover with flight, which basically is a front handspring. And the back handspring is just this kind of bridge looking symbol. We write down a lot of back handsprings. So I'm assuming that you originally maybe had a back walkover symbol with a line for flight underneath, but that was just too much because we write the symbol down so much. So it's just this, and it also kind of like what the body is supposed to look like in a back handspring. Hopefully a little longer than that though. And then some bars one. We have a cast, and it kind of looks like the body shape, right? We think of it as this is kind of the arms, the head is over here, and then the rest of the body. Swing and counter swing. The dot is a representation of the bar, and then the line is a representation of the body that's going around it. For my swings. And then the glide kip, so that's the kip on the low bar. This is what my body would look like at the start of a kip before I extend at the other side of the bar. And then the long kip. For me, I just like to kind of look at it as jumping to the high bar, the shape that my hand and my grip have, or would have. I don't do those anymore. Catching the high bar and then going into the long kip. So using all of these kinds of roots and prefixes and suffixes, we can create much more complex skills. So a backwards roll to handstand. Well, a backwards roll is basically a backwards salto, but that is done with support on the floor. So I have my two lines underneath to support, and it ends in a handstand. The side aerial is a cartwheel that's in the air and free of hands. So it's the cartwheel symbol with my aerial or free symbol. A straddle jump full, popa, is a straddle shape in the air, so the little line underneath it, and that does a full turn on itself. A beat jump or changement is a straight body position in the air that has a switch of the legs. Front pike mount on the balance beam starts with flight from a beat board, goes all the way up on the beam to do the front salto, and it's in a pike position. A double wolf turn would be a wolf position, but it has support on the floor because it's a wolf turn. And we have my double here, so my circle with my two lines. Split jump, split leap, saison. So it's interesting because all these things are basically a split position in the air, but they are all different and they all have different symbols. So jump is, in this case, would be a 2 feet to 2 feet. The leap is 1 foot to 1 foot. So that's why the symbol is the split in the air. This one has 2 feet, and this one is just split in the air. The saison is a little bit different because it's technically considered a hop, and it is in a split position, but it's supposed to be on an angle, right? To be kind of slanted. You can see my video I'm trying to show you. Slanted in the air like this and not like this. So we've basically took our split and we've slanted it, added our body here that's supposed to kind of be upright, and we still have a little light underneath to show that's in the air. But really, it just looks like a Y with a little line. So it's still kind of making sense. And some more complicated bars ones. A cast to handstand. Well, it's our cast symbol, and it goes all the way up to a handstand. A back hip circle is a circle here, which I do realize is also the symbol for full turn on beam and floor. But on the bars, on its own like this is a back hip circle, and it's basically just representing the trajectory of the full body going all the way around the bar. A giant is a swing around the bar that finishes in a handstand. The symbol makes sense. A cast pike on, well, it's a cast that finishes in a pike position that has support on the bar. Both my hands and my feet are on the bar at this point. A stalder to handstand. I'm in a stalder or straddled position, so my legs kind of look like this, going all the way around the bar and finishing in a handstand. And then going all the way much more complicated, this is a full-in dismount. It starts with a swing underneath the bar, and then in the first back salto, the gymnast does the full twist. That's why it's shown here at the beginning. As the full twist is happening in the first backward salto of a double back salto. Am I overwhelming you with information? If the speed is not right, please don't hesitate to mention it in the chat, or if you have any questions. Okay. So the third portion of the presentation has to do with our judges handbook. Here we go. So just important guidelines. We have our GBC registration, the judges' roles and expectations, the judging pathway, courses, clinics, continuing professional education, judging records, availability document, and honorarium. I kept the money part for the end. Hopefully keep you interested till the very end. So for registration, this is for insurance purposes. This is mandatory, it's not optional. Any judge that wants to participate in GBC sanctioned events or Gymnastics BC, sanctioned events must be registered as a judge. Now, if you're not affiliated with any club like myself, then you would be registered as an independent member. And if you already are a coach or an athlete, anything like that, you don't have to pay more. But the club, when they do your registration, they do have to check off the judge box as well to make sure that you're registered in all applicable categories. And again, insurance purposes, super important. As judges, we are expected to work collaboratively with our zone judging chair, as well as the Gymnastics BC panel coordinator to create assignments. Talk a little bit more about that later. We always must act in a professional manner. So we have to be on time. We have to stay at our apparatus until the competition is completed. We have to avoid any conversation with coaches regarding the evaluation of the exercises unless it's responding to an official inquiry. Basically, we have to make sure that we avoid doing anything that might look like there is bias. We also must be willing to compromise when the two counting scores are out of range. So there are rules that the counting scores of a routine have to be within a certain range. So for example, at a 9.5 and higher final score, the judges can't be more than 0.2 apart. So it becomes really important to really have that teamwork in case we don't agree to make sure that we are in range. We must wear the correct uniform. We talked about that earlier. We have to keep track of our judging activities, including CP, and submit our record annually to our zone judging chair before June 15th. Failure to do so will result in negative consequences. So it's very, very important. We'll talk a bit more about that later. And we have to limit ourselves to judging, evaluating, and scoring at the competition. We are not to involve ourselves during warm-up or training, unless it's, of course, at a training camp. But especially during warm-up, it's definitely not our place to point things out to coaches or athletes that have to do with execution or routine construction. Again, that could also be seen as a bias. And we definitely don't want to have bias or even do anything that appears like we have bias. Okay. So this is the Canadian judging system, or the Canadian judging pathway. So as a new judge, you would fall under the first column here. The minimum age to start judging is 15. However, you could start at 14 with a recommendation letter from your coach. In order to become JO5 rated and to be able to judge JO1 through to 5, you have to successfully complete the JO5 course and exam. You must do a minimum of 1 session as a shadow judge. So a shadow judge means that you go to the competition, you act exactly like a judge, you sit at the table, you judge all the routines, but your score won't count and you would not be paid. It's part of your education process. There are also a mandatory minimum of 12 hours of CPE for the year, and that's the continuing professional education. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And as I did mention, you'd be eligible to judge 1 to 5. And then as you move along, you can see all of these requirements. These are outlined in the WAG Judges Handbook that you can find on the Gymnastics BC website if you want to reference this later on. And then Adriana, I forget the exact requirement regarding the mentorship session. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We have a requirement that you have the opportunity to attend a competition, a GBC sanctioned competition, and we will sit you with a judge who will practice with you. And so you'll judge just like a shadow judge, and at the end, the other judge will come and go through all your routines with you, and you can decide together if you're ready to be put on a panel and be assigned competitions in the future. So it's like a mini assessment, but it's really a mentorship session with another judge.
And this is in addition to this shadow session that's highlighted on the document?
If you really feel you're super ready to be assessed at your first session as a shadow judge, you could maybe challenge that and request to have your assessment done as your first session. But new judges usually shadow quite a few sessions on different events so that they feel comfortable judging before they are thrown out onto the floor for real.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so the CPE that we keep talking about. So they are activities that are usually organized by the zone or provinces. And they're basically ways for us to keep up our judging knowledge and to increase it throughout the year. Especially in a season like the one that we just had where, well, everything was canceled. Some judges may not have had the opportunity to actually judge enough sessions this year. So this year, the importance of CP has been highlighted even more, I think. So CP activities can include things like your judging course, any of these kinds of webinars that we've been doing through GBC. It could be video or live practice sessions. It could be going into a club and doing some kind of shadow judging at the club. It could be done through camps where judges are asked to come in and give their feedback. So there's lots of different ways to complete the CPE. I've noted here the little chart of what the minimum is per year per level. There's also a required minimum number of clinic or course hours. There are also maximums, and I believe those will be published in the new handbook for next season. Hey, judging records. So they're basically a little list. I guess I could just show you mine since I have it right here, where you can detail all of the judging activities that you've done. Not sure if you can see quite well on the video here, but it's kind of like this. And it details, actually, you fill in all of the CPE that you've done, all of the sessions that you've judged, and this goes on your judging record to make sure that you're fulfilling your requirement for your level for the year. So usually at the start of each session, all the active judges are emailed what we call the availability document. and we ask that all of the judges fill this out. Now, this is not a commitment that you're definitely going to judge the competitions that you've marked as a yes. It's just showing interest and potential availability. What will happen after that is that the person making the panels will go through the availability document and will email everyone that has said yes to a particular competition and say, hey, this competition is happening in 3 weeks. This is the schedule. I need judges. Are you interested? At that point, that's when the judges would fill out what we call the APE document for availability panel expenses. And once you fill that out, then it is an actual commitment that, yes, you're definitely available and willing to judge this particular competition. So it's kind of a twofold process. And then a note here about what it means to be an active judge. So to be active, judges must have completed the requirements of the previous session, which include attendance to a clinic, completion of the CP activities, and submission of their judging records. Money, fun part. Or hopefully that's not the only fun part, but. So currently our honorarium is based on your level as well as the number of athletes registered in the session. So as a brand new judge, you've taken the GO 3 to 5 clinic, you've passed that exam, and then maybe you've shadow judged a couple of times, you've gotten your assessment, and now you're ready to actually judge. Any session that you judge, you'll be paid a minimum of $50 per. Now, realizing, looking at this, that there's definitely not going to be any sessions that are going to be more than 48 in the upcoming season because of COVID regulations. So it's kind of a bit of a moot point for now. But as things hopefully go back to sessions where we can have more than that number of athletes, that pay scale increases basically based on the number of athletes registered. And then as you can see, as you move up in the levels, so does your honorarium. And just to note that this is by no means a dollar representation of the amount of work that goes into being a judge of all these various levels. It's merely a honorarium, token of appreciation. Thank you for spending your time with us this afternoon kind of money. So we definitely do appreciate it. But I just don't want to take away from any of the work and the preparation and all that we have to put in as judges that is not being remunerated. That's English, right? And then, yeah, just that little note that I mentioned earlier, that shadow judging is not a paid session. It's part of your education, and it would count as CPE rather than as a session judged. Okay. Any questions? Been a very quiet group for questions. I know we don't have as many participants as usual, but hopefully no questions means that I've been clear. If you do have anything that comes up after the session, you're definitely welcome to email me. That's not a problem. Or you can also email Adriana as the Women's Judging Chair, or you can look up who is your zone judging chair and email them. In terms of resources, so if you're interested from this session possibly to start judging, you would want to keep an eye out on the Gymnastics BC website and calendar for when the judging courses for the next season will be announced. I assume that they will be happening in the fall as they usually do. So that's definitely a place that's good to look at. So everyone should know the Gymnastics BC website, gymbc.org. Additional resources would be any of the JO either compulsory or optional materials. So the JO Code of Points. There's the compulsory app that you can purchase as well. Although maybe that's not recommended as the compulsory program will change starting for the 2021-2022 season technically. So if you purchase the app now, I believe it's only good for 1 year. I mean, that's up to you. Other resources would actually be the availability document. Adriana has added many, many links and resources and document in there. Actually, Adriana, could you put the link of that in the chat? That would be good. And then, of course, the USA Gymnastics website is also a resource, as we are using their program with the JO system. So they do have some resources on there. And finally, there's a website that is for the National Association of Women Gymnastics Judges in the United States, and it is full of cheat sheets, of mock exams, routines, all kinds of things that you can look at and learn, and most of it is free and fully accessible. And that website is nawgjj.org. So it stands for the National Association of Women Gymnastics Judges. They refer it as NAWJ.org. I like to say nawgjj. I think that is it for the main resources. Again, if you have any questions about those or you'd like the links or anything like that, you're welcome to contact me. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, the recording should be made available to the Gymnastics BC YouTube page in a few days if you'd like to refer back to it. And then I would like to ask you if you have any suggestions for future judging webinars. There's not many people on the call, so you're welcome to unmute and ask out loud or suggest out loud, pardon me, if you don't want to type it in. Oh, hi, Holly.
There's a question here from someone about daughter turning 14 in January. And she does have to be 14 for the start of the course.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and then for the following fall, she will need a recommendation letter from her coach to enroll in the JO 1 to 5 course. So she will have to wait till next year.
That's right. Very excited to hear that we have judging interest from someone so young. That's awesome. Any other questions, or if you have suggestions for future webinars, that would be awesome to receive that. Okay. Well, thank you very, very, very much for your time, spending a little bit of your Thursday afternoon with us. I'm seeing that a lot of people are able to go back to their gyms very soon, or already have as of today. So that's super exciting. I wish for everyone to have a very safe and fun return to play. And thank you very much, Adriana, for your assistance today. Just want to point out that Adriana is a volunteer, and she puts in a ridiculous amount of hours and effort in thinking into all of the various things that she does for gymnastics, particularly gymnastics judging. So thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Can I add that I did put my email on the chat? I was unable to link the availability document. So we have 3 new judges here who have got your names, and please write down my email real quick, and I can send me an email. I'll send it to you, and I'll also include you in the emails when we have our judging courses going out.
Awesome. Thanks, Adriana.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Hi, Olga. I know you're trying to say something, but you're just muted right now.
Yeah, it's me.
Oh, hi, Olga. Why are you here, silly?
I don't know. I didn't think it's too easy, of course, but I listen. Nothing to do, better to see somebody from our community, gymnastic community.
Cool. Well, I hope that you, at least that it